Chicago native Rabbi Saul Prombaum served as spiritual leader of Congregation Sons of Abraham in La Crosse from 1982 to 2019. He holds a bachelor's degree in Hebrew and history and a master's degree in business, both from UW-Madison. In 1989, he became an ordained rabbi. Saul is a guest speaker throughout the Cooley region on diverse topics related to Judaism and the Jewish people. He has taught college-level modern and biblical Hebrew courses at both UW-La Crosse and Viterbo University. Saul is also a writer. For those who follow Wiley Publishing House's For Dummies series, you should know that Saul is the rabbi they turn to write Torah for Dummies. He also had a role in developing a publication about Jesus of Nazareth. In 2007, Rabbi Prombaum received the Iverson-Fraking Ecumenism Award from the Bethany St. Joseph Corporation, given to those in the La Crosse area whose work is seen as a bridge across religions. Saul and his wife Karen now live in Minneapolis. They have 4 children and 6 grandchildren. Please give a warm welcome to our friend Saul Prombaum.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be with you. First of all, I would like to give a shout out to the people from Sons of Abraham and to thank Rabbi Brian for helping me choose the song from Debbie Friedman. For those of us who knew her, a native of Minneapolis, died very young, 57 years old. I admired her courage for being one of the pioneers in the LGBTQ community to be out and not to shy away from it. And as my youngest son would say, if not for people like Debbie, it would be very hard for him to have come out as well. I also in the UU community, I saw Nancy Matchett, and I want to thank you, Nancy, and remember fondly all the wonderful things that you brought to Sons of Abraham with Busia Lugovir when you would come to programs like Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance, and things. And so I'm just honored to to see you and to see everybody. And it means a tremendous amount for me to be here with you today. I need to correct a couple things. I did not write Torah for Dummies. I'm too smart for that. I was the technical editor, so that every time Wiley publishes a Dummies book, the author submits their chapters, and I'm basically the checker for the author, and also raising questions that the author needs to consider. And also, I was privileged to work with the same author, Arthur Kurzweil. Although you can only be a technical editor once, Wiley has very, very strict rules about. I was behind the scenes there on Kabbalah for Dummies. So for those of you who are interested in mysticism, I urge you to de-dummify yourselves with that. I also wanted to say that the Mordecai Kaplan's philosophy, that is the what we call Reconstructionist Judaism, actually started really in the 1940s, when he was a professor at the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York. My father was one of his students. My father was also a doctoral student of Heschel, was also at the seminary. Mordecai Kaplan was vilified in his lifetime, and in some ways Heschel also was marginalized for very strong positions that they took. But what motivated Mordecai Kaplan was that he was looking at the number of bright, educated Jewish people who were embracing socialism before the bloom came off the rose. And what I mean by that is before it was, well known that what Stalin had been doing in Russia, which became a kind of a moment of crisis within the socialist community. Mordecai Kaplan believed that what God was a projection of everything that was of value to the community, including its history and its culture and its language. And so people, other rabbis, of course, from different movements would vilify him. And he had the last laugh by living past 100. He outlived all of his detractors. There's a joke that is told that in his last years, he's visited in a nursing home by a couple of his students. And when they're leaving him, he calls after them, "God bless you." And one student turns to the other and says, "Do you think that maybe in his old age?" "Oh, no. When Mordecai Kaplan says God, he means the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College." Okay, so with that, I think it's important, if you want to understand, try and get your hands on a Reconstructionist prayer book. It's some of the most beautiful prayers I've ever heard. And also, if you really, how do I say this? Paul McCartney was once quoted as saying that God is the word good with one of the O's taken out. Okay. What I would like to do, I think is really important, because my attention was drawn by Ron, and I thank you, to the UU principles, and I would like to talk about them now, because they're so rich that what is left of my presentation, some of that we can get into in the Q&A. I just think that this is very, very important. Principle number one: the inherent worth and dignity of every person. I was glad to see that when you click on the hyperlink for this, I saw this at the website, that it's attributed to Abraham Joshua Heschel. There's so much that I could say about Heschel. He formed a very close friendship with Martin Luther King Jr. And in fact, Heschel marched with Heschel in the front line at Selma. You will not see that in the movie. I don't know why that is, but that's just the way it is. Heschel influenced King to broaden his fight, and he became an outspoken critic of the Vietnam War. Now, you know that when King received the Nobel Peace Prize, there are just too many white people that they just couldn't handle that. I mean, it's like, how could this have happened? And they picked at it in every which way, knowing Heschel was an anti-war activist. They asked Heschel, "Well, don't you think that the Reverend Dr. King should be focusing on civil rights and leaving the anti-war movement to others?" And Heschel said, "I think that the winner of the Nobel Prize for Peace should be allowed to talk about war and peace." Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, absolutely. I think that when the Torah talks about being the human being created in the image of God, I think, at least for me, it means that when you're looking at another human being, you're looking at an image of God. And heaven help you if you do anything to that person that is unjust, unkind, because you are creating a direct affront to God every time you hurt another human being. Acceptance of this third principle, acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. We say in Hebrew, if only that could be, that we could accept one another. It's a nasty part of human nature that we can get into, but we we talk about it. I think some of us really believe it and work towards it, and other people are afraid of it. Fourth principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. I think that if you asked any Orthodox rabbi, to get down and dirty and say, where do you stand on this? The rabbi has to say, is that built into the fabric of the Jewish tradition is unrelenting, free search, intellectual pursuit of the truth and meaning, balanced off by a very rigorous behavioral system that is a check and balance on the person. So for example, some people explain the sacrificial system, the karban, the coming close from the Hebrew, as a person gives a proxy of oneself to God, does not jump off of granddad's bluff and say, I give you my life, God, because I love you. God is thinking, well, I gave you the life. When I want it back, I will take it. And so the truth has to be in boundaries that help the person do the exploration. It's a paradox, I understand. Byron Sherwin, Rabbi Sherwin, Dr. Sherwin was a student of Heschel, and in the subject he calls depth theology, which essentially means that just as we're on a personal journey towards self-understanding, theology has to do the same thing. Is that theology is not static, is that we're constantly in the pursuit of trying to understand the relationship between the human being and something that is bigger than the human. For Abraham Heschel, the truth is that the truth cannot be known with any certainty. Heschel would have agreed with Franz Rosenzweig, the modern Jewish philosopher, who said, truth is a noun only for God, for man it is but an adjective. I think it's more than that. I think the search for truth is never ending. And I think that's certainly embodied in the principles of the UUs. And I'm glad to see it and to comment on it. Fifth principle, the right of conscience and the use of democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. Absolutely. The question that I have is there really a separation of church and state in this country? I'm not so sure. The question that I would have for the UUs is, would you openly, as a body, during your services, would you endorse a political candidate, which some people have the erroneous belief cannot be done in a church or in a religious setting. The government purposely leaves that point vague because in a way, we have given up a lot by accepting tax exemption. We are in the back pocket of our government. And I find that that's part of the problems with organized religion. Not all of it, but quite a bit of it is adopting a patriotic stance that supports a particular governmental point of view. And that makes me pretty sad. The sixth principle, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Absolutely. A caveat here is that the Torah says in Deuteronomy, tzedek, that is righteousness or justice, tzedek tirdof, you shall pursue it. As in any pursuit, you may not catch it, but you have to go after it. And this is the main thing, that even justice is not static. Is that there's one thing called justice as a whole subject in and of itself, because what is just for one may be unjust concomitantly to someone else. And seventh principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part. Amen. Absolutely. You cannot say that there's ecology and there's humanity. It's all linked. We are all linked, and we have a lot to learn from the animal world about compassion. Those that are supposed to be lower animals then need to learn from them. So this brings us to the talk of Jewish perspectives on theology. And first I have to say, look, theology is really a branch of philosophy. So where the philosopher leaves off and theology begins is sometimes not clear. I want to begin with an example of popular theology, probably one of the most, and that is Harold Kushner, When Bad Things Happen to Good People, which is still a best-selling book. My father, of blessed memory, was a career hospital chaplain, a jail chaplain, and I used to go with him. And I remember when the book came out, that we were visiting in Michael Reese Hospital, and we met a young woman, age 20, who was in the terminal stage of a cancer. And she said the book gave me a lot of comfort, because by reading Rabbi Kushner, I truly believe that I am not being punished for something, that God is not punishing me. Now, Kushner's platform, if you will, or where he comes from, is nothing new. In fact, in the medieval world, there were other rabbis who put forth. Basically, it's under the topic of what we call theodicy, or God justification. And what he does is he borrows, and some of you may be familiar with the work of Alfred North Whitehead, who said, look, there are three propositions. One is God is good. Two, there's evil in the world. And God is all powerful. So what Alfred North Whitehead, what he says is, look, only two of those can be existent together and work. So for example, if God is all powerful and there's evil, then God is not all powerful. If God is good, so you can work it any way you want. I know for the sake of time, is that if God is all powerful and there's evil, then God is not good. Okay. Harold Kushner had a son who died at the age of 8. I don't remember the name of the disease, but he had this accelerated aging disease, where by the time the kid was 8, he was in his 90s. His body was already, and it's a horrible thing for a parent to watch. Any death of any child is a horrible to watch, and he just could not accept that this kind of thing was ordained by an all powerful God. And so Kushner remains a very important voice, both in the subject of theodicy, God justification, and in bringing comfort to people who are struggling with the idea of what God is. Now, I must tell you is that renewed interest actively in theology happened in World War II, during the years of the Holocaust, and in the aftermath with the bombs that ended the war, and the arms race, and all of this, and what was happening to humanity. And what came out of the Holocaust is trying to struggle because of a time. Let me do this very quickly. These are some theological responses to the Holocaust. No new response is needed. The Holocaust is like all other horrific tragedies. This event merely prompts us again to investigate the issue of why bad things happen to good people. The Holocaust shouldn't change our theology. Rabbinic Judaism has a doctrine from the books of the prophets called Mipnei Chata'enu, because of our sins we were punished. During biblical times, when calamities befell the Jewish people, the prophets stressed that suffering is a natural result of not following God's law, and prosperity, peace, and health are the natural results of following God's law. We know this in some of the people who came over and founded this country early on as well. They believe this. Therefore, some people in the Haredi, in the most ultra-Orthodox Jewish community, have taught that the Jewish people in Europe were deeply sinful. In this view, the Holocaust, which included 1.5 million children, is a just retribution from God. Yeah, sure. The Holocaust is an instance of the temporary eclipse of God. There are times when God is inexplicably absent from history. If there were a God, he would surely have prevented the Holocaust. Since God did not prevent it, then God never really existed in the first place. God is dead. If there were a God, he would surely have prevented the Holocaust. Since God did not prevent it, then God has for some reason turned away from the world and left us to ourselves forevermore, a deist position. God is therefore no longer relevant to humanity. Terrible events such as the Holocaust are the price we have to pay for having free will. In this view, God will not and cannot interfere with history. Otherwise, our free will would effectively cease to exist. The Holocaust only reflects poorly on humanity and not God. This is a position of Eliezer Berkowitz. See, if you go to Genesis, to the 6th day, to the creation of the human being, if you look at all the other days, God looks at it and says that what God created was good, but not the human being. Human being is not good. Why is the human being not good? Because if you're good, it means you didn't have a choice. You didn't have a free will. Isaiah 45:7 says, it is written that God forms light, creates darkness, makes peace, and creates evil. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. This is from the King James Version. And what this is saying is, this is what Berkowitz is saying is, that if you look at the Hebrew for the word for creation of the human being, there's an extra letter that shouldn't be there. And this extra letter reflects the built-in dual nature of the human being, is that we are good and we are evil. And if the evil side comes to the fore and triumphs over the good, Berkowitz would say, what are you looking at God for? God did not build gas chambers, we did. Okay. So this is, a very important thing is, maybe God is not part of the discussion. And then perhaps the Holocaust is in some way a revelation from God. The event issues a call for Jewish affirmation for survival, a subject in and of itself. The Holocaust is a mystery beyond our comprehension. It may have a meaning or a purpose, but if so, this meaning transcends human understanding. For those who are familiar with the book of Job and its message, basically God talks to Job, but says the very fact that I'm talking to you, even though I don't give you an answer for why you're suffering, the fact that I talk to you is enough. You don't understand me. Even though the book of Job begins with God and the devil making a deal that the devil will be permitted to persecute a righteous man, and God steps in. And what is it about? The devil says, I can make that human being curse you. God says, you're on. That person is so upright, no matter what happens to him, he will not curse me. And so Job is basically muscled down by God by saying, look, Job, you don't understand. And I'm not going to tell you about what happens in the first verses of this long book. And in fact, what God is admitting to Job is, you're right. You were treated unjustly. Let's leave it at that. Reform Rabbi Ignaz Maybaum proposed that the Holocaust is the ultimate form of vicarious atonement. The Jewish people become, in fact, the suffering servant of Isaiah. The Jewish people collectively suffer for the sins of the world. And then finally, God does exist, but God is not omnipotent. Getting back to the Herald Kushner argument. And so some of you remember the cover of Time magazine, God is Dead. Richard Rubenstein was a rabbi at the time, a leading proponent. I want to share with you that one of my teachers, Byron Sherwin, has a chapter in one of his books called Portrait of God as a Young Artist, that God's creative side is coming out in the creation of the world, and that the world that we have is a conglomeration of leftovers of worlds that God created and smashed in a succession until God said, "This one pleases me." Now, how do we come to something like that? It's because if Genesis is the creation of the world, one of the things that's left out is it never said that water is created. So how can God hover over the face of the deep if God did not create water? That is, where did water come from that it could be separated from the dry land? We're not told. So some postulate that our world, in fact, Orthodox Jews who claim that the world is 5,782 years old, and that's all it is, say that you find dinosaur bones in the earth because there were forms of the world that had these creatures, and when the world was put together like a lump of clay, the bones were in there when it was reconstituted. So I think there's so much more to talk about, as you can imagine, that I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here with you. My recommendation for reading is, it's called The Great Partnership: God, Science, and the Search for Meaning by Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, the former chief rabbi of Great Britain, a beloved chief rabbi who stepped down in 2013, and he died in 2020. A great mind, a compassionate rabbi who wrote another book that is called Not in God's Name: Confronting Religious Violence, directed specifically to Christian, Jewish, and Muslims. And he said when the book came out, he was very gratified that many young Muslim men were reading the book. And basically, what he says is, if we can't get together and talk about our shared stories, we're not going to get anywhere. We're just going to keep justifying why we have to wail on each other and cause so much pain. So I thank you for having me today, and certainly open to questions. I come to you today from Mount Sinai. Behind me, wind won't look at my hair, and it's just good to be here. Thank you.
Well,